Like to call our February 10th council meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Yakanuki within the Tanaka Nation. We value their friendship and us as neighbors. Would like a motion to adopt the agenda as presented with just one addition that we add freedom of the floor to our three regional directors here so that they can participate in the police report. Motion 2, Councillor Baldwin, second by Councillor Houghton. All in favor? Motion carried. So the agenda is adopted along with freedom of the floor for the three regional directors. I would like to then have a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting of January 27, 2026. Councillor Iser, second Councillor Dumas. All in favor? Motion is carried. And if we can have them up on screen, we'll go with our mayor and councillor reports for the last while. So on the 29th of January, I attended our Creston Valley Housing Corporation meeting, and things are well on track there. On the 5th of February, Creston Valley Services Committee meeting. And we'll move on to Councillor Ayres.
Yeah, on the 29th of January, I attended the Creston Valley Housing Corporation meeting.
Councillor Dumas.
And I as well attended the Creston Valley Housing Corporation on January 29th, and then the Creston Valley Blossom Festival Association on February 2nd. And then also the Creston Valley Fire Service Advisory Committee on February 3rd.
Councillor Holland.
On February 3rd, I attended the Public Art Working Committee.
Councillor Baldwin.
January 29th, I attended the Creston Community Forest Board meeting, and on January 31st, I attended a special meeting to purchase a building and for the Creston Community Forest. And then on February the 2nd, attended the Central Kootenai Invasive Species Society at the Regional Invasive Species Society Working Group meeting online, and then of course the Creston Valley Fire Services Advisory Committee meeting on February 3rd. Snuff.
Any other reports?
I attended the Creston Valley Community Housing Society meeting, and I'll write a report soon.
Okay, thank you. I would like a motion then that the verbal and written reports of council be received. Councillor Ayres, seconded Councillor Dumas. All in favor? Motion is carried. We will then go to our committee of the whole. So motion to resolve ourselves into the committee of the whole. Councillor Baldwin, second Councillor Baldwin. All in favor? That motion is carried. We'll proceed right to our delegations and Staff Sergeant Brandon Bolsiak with our quarterly update.
There it is.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council staff, thank you for having me back again. Quick delegation this quarter of the graphics and whatnot. So I'll just go over the basic numbers for what we've been dealing with through the last calendar quarter of 25 and into just the start of 26 here. That last quarter of 25 saw our detachment respond to a total of 917 calls for service. Again, putting us over the sorry, I don't have the exact number. We're just under 4,200 calls for service for the calendar year 2025. The split on those 472 calls for service in the municipality, 406 in the rural area. When you compare that to the year prior, we were 917 total, 468, 439 split. So very, very similar numbers. There's a discrepancy you'll note on the if you add up those last two numbers. Just there's often in the course of a year there's 10 or more files generated that are non-address specific, that are just administrative files. Looking at the start of 26, we are we were at 394 when I left the truck. Calls for service with a split of 198 in the municipality and 182 in the rural area. So again, the numbers on the split have been relatively consistent the last couple of years now with the averages. Not a lot by way of significance with the calls for service in that reporting period. We were fortunately through the holiday season, things tapered a little bit, which was nice and allowed us to give a couple of our members a little bit of time off to be with family. So that was a positive there for sure. As the weather's been getting a bit better here, the workload increases as is typical. Our staffing picture at the detachment right now, as far as actual filled position numbers, we're 12 of 13. We have one hard vacancy that is going to increase to a second hard vacancy in the next, I'll have the notification of that for the coming couple of weeks for the transfer taking place in the next 90 days. As we're losing a member to Ottawa. Excuse me, so that'll put us to 11 of 13. Once we get to that number of 11, we are down 2 more of those positions due to long-term medical leave. And one is currently on a graduated return to work as a result of a physical injury. So currently, as of right now, we're functioning 9 of 13, myself included in that. One member has been identified to replace one of those hard vacancies. That member has accepted the transfer from Cranbrook to here. However, has to go through the relocation process, sell a house, that type of stuff. So it's not a sure thing until the house is sold in our world. That's where we're at for staffing. As far as the work of note, the drug work continues. We've throughout that quarter into this year again already, we've executed a number of Controlled Drugs and Substances Act search warrants. We're certainly the trend from the work that was being done over the past couple of years is that the quantities of seizure is significantly less, which is, and it's entirely speculative, but my perception around that is we've been hitting these regular clients on a regular basis, and that often leads to mistrust and organizational levels above them to handle as much quantity at a time. So positive results is ultimately what I'm saying. It seems that the steady enforcement and constant application of pressure on those known individuals is effective. We did have in one of our last executions, search warrant executions, I should clarify. We did have a connection established to known higher scale organized crime in the Lower Mainland. That crime group is known to be trying to advance their agenda around the province, and obviously us being a prime location with our international border accessibility. Plus side with that, we've hit them as they've established every time in short order. And then the plus side with that is they are the province's highest priority for enforcement. So it comes with some additional funding and support on that side of things too, to help the municipality. Property crime continue to have issues. What I would refer to as isolated issues with property crime. When I say isolated, I mean it in the sense of it's the same couple of clients over and over again. When those clients are removed from community in a custodial status for short periods of time, like typically happens with property crime, I find it rather interesting that much of the property crime doesn't take place during those absences. So We've been working with the municipality with staff on some options that have supported us in aiding in enforcement of certain types of stolen property. And I won't go into the details of that on public record, as they're enforcement strategies that we keep to our chest. Outside of that, right now it's been of those vacancies I mentioned, we've been a very long time now, going on 6 months, with our supervisory capacity at 50% in the detachment. 2 of those vacancies are 2 of the 4 of us supervisors. So there's been a lot of administrative pressures that have been dealt with, and the odd committee that's had to have been backed away from for a little while. Hoping once we get those numbers back up again, we can get back to the good stuff there. As for what's going on in the short term here, right now, we've got significant policing pressure related to upcoming event on Thursday here in town that has caused a lot of attention, and we are simply doing the prep work behind that to make the resources available to just ensure that safety remains the highest priority for everybody involved. That's what I have.
Councillor Baldwin?
Recriminalization of the small drug possession stuff, the pilot project that's been on for 3 years. It's over now, right? Does that affect you in a material way? Or does the detachment?
It doesn't have a tremendous impact here, because a lot of the drug files that we work, we've found our way to success in obtaining judicial authorizations without having to deal with the under 2.5 gram levels. It will, having that the ability to enforce that again does give us more tools in our kit to you're starting at the user level and working your way up the ladder, and having the ability to detain under those circumstances is definitely beneficial in my view from an enforcement standpoint. That being said, it's also something that direction has been given that there's to be a very measured approach to that as we re-enter that atmosphere.
Just curious.
Councillor Houghton?
I just wanted to talk about the vacancies that you have, and I'm quite confident there's lots of recruiting going on, but what are your short-term strategies? I can't imagine at 9 of 13 positions filled is sustainable for a long time, so.
It's tired.
Yeah.
You look tired.
There are not really there's not really the ability in these rural spots to have relief strategies. I try to bring in reserve constables from that program, but that's another program. There's so much pressure on for relief in the far northern isolated post places where members haven't seen the light of day outside their little hamlet a year, so that's where that priority goes. I've done some things here in the last few months with scheduling and adjusting some things on either end, so to speak, to allow for some downtime for them whenever I can. There's definitely a lot of the supervisor, the commander being out on the road taking calls, which is not typical, but it's what we got to do to get by. And so far, everybody's still there and happy in the workplace. But obviously, yeah, it would be nice to not be at 70%.
Mhm.
Councillor Eisler?
So, eventually, hopefully we'll get back up to 13. And so in this year's budget, there was a proposal for Operation Sergeant, and I was wondering how that looks for you.
For me personally, that's amazing. that to have a position like this Creston's a very unique detachment makeup. I believe that Creston and Hazelton are the only two detachments in British Columbia that are staff sergeant detachments that don't have a sergeant. It's the way the workload is typically split is the commander is expected to do these types of things, liaising with the Indigenous communities, the regional districts, attending the committees, doing all of the more political bureaucratic side of the job, right? Managing the finances, the budget, that type of thing. And then you would have a sergeant that oversees operations. So the investigations, the training, the equipment, those types of things. So in a place like Creston, I have to wear all those hats, and it's burdensome, right? To be honest. So that an addition such as that, it would be phenomenal, not just for my sake, but for overall quality of supervision, in ensuring that mandatory training is staying up to date, and just a real positive. I appreciate the council's considering that.
Just a follow-up. And I get maybe you're not the right person to ask about, but because we don't quite meet the threshold for that, like we're one position short, I believe. Where did that number come from?
That's a very good question. There's a unit, I guess you'd call them, at headquarters in E Division, that is their organization class is what their title is, and they have certain ratios in math that they keep very close to them, to their unit, as to how these numbers are established. I don't think it's not a secret here. I mean, we've talked a lot about uniqueness, and not to speak out against my own organization, but I think we have to broaden horizons when it comes to assessing a place that is geographically spread out like Creston, with uniqueness like 2 ports of entry, a large lake, a highway pass, and being occupied tip to tip, right? So I think when you factor all those things in, there should be some flexibility in those numbers, just my opinion.
Yeah.
So those are definitely organizational level decisions.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Councilor Harris.
I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned that there has been some crime here attached to the group in the Lower Mainland. And you mentioned you get some additional funding because of that being attached to this Lower Mainland group?
Yeah, so there are a couple different funding branches, so to speak, and one of them is called PTEP, and that's I want to get my acronym right. I believe it's Provincial Targeted Enforcement Program, and that's the provincial pot that our combined force special enforcement units and whatnot work out of to really focus on organized crime specifically. So when those CFSU teams are primarily hubbed in the larger cities, and so when there's opportunity for local detachments to do what would essentially be an extension of those units' work, but they can't come and actually do the work, they grant funding to help us, with overtime shifts for surveillance, fund if we have to bring your team in, that type of stuff, right? So it's similarly, we talked about last year, the site program. Those are all just enhancements the province has made to budgets to be able to support local law enforcement. So what I essentially run the projects, I do the work, the guys do the work, sorry, them gals, not me. I do the typing and the reporting back. And then what we do is whenever we're going to work a project, we attach an IO number to that project. So every claim that every member puts in, every bit of money spent has that number attached to it, which allows us to track the money. And then I write back to the province. It's essentially grant writing saying, here's what we did, here's the results, here's the total cost. And they're phenomenal typically in saying, hey, yeah, we're gonna send your municipality back a check now for that or whatever it may be.
Any questions from our regional directors? Director Jackman?
Yeah, thanks, and hopefully you can hear me easily now.
Yes.
I can.
Through the chair, through the mayor, what I just heard you saying is that if you did the math between the extra money for overtime and the outside people, I mean, we see an armored car in town from time to time with what, 4 people or more? Those people added up are probably 1 FTE or more. Maybe they're 1.5 between your overtime and the extra people, which clearly would state that your strength required is 14 point something. So maybe you've done the math and submitted that, but is there any other way to amplify that voice to your headquarters that it's pretty clear that, you know, Hazelton doesn't have many international border crossings that you have, as you just stated, that your effective required strength, if you add up reality, the last couple of years, exceeds 14 full-time positions.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I'm sure much to my boss's chagrin, but, we've talked, I've worked with staff a lot through the last couple of years to really identify the pressures and the uniqueness that this detachment faces. And historically looking backward at the, let's call it what it is, the burnout factor, right? There's a lot of work there that's identified. There's a lot of, I give you the example of the calls for service or the caseload per member ratio, which is what's one of the things considered. But a member that say works in Peachland, for example, might respond to 4 calls for service within a 27-kilometer radius during their shift. A member in Creston might respond to 2 calls for service because the first one in the morning is in Ryandell and the second one is a serious collision on the summit of the Kootenai Pass. And then maybe they need to go down to Kingsgate because they've intercepted somebody with drugs in their vehicle. So like that only counts as 3 calls against the caseload per member. But as far as time consumption, it's taken a shift and a half to get through not just the response, but the follow-on documentation, because they were driving so much through, right? So those are the types of uniquenesses that we've tried to escalate. And it's not that they're not heard. I think that there's a lot of thought being put into that right now, not just for Creston, but for a number of detachments around the province where these things are being identified. Additionally, is the increase in the administrative workload for a constable. Like just a constable, not even my level. When I look at the administrative requirements of these members compared to 20 plus years ago when I joined, it's probably no less than 300% greater than it was then. So that adds up and fast. Yes, absolutely. Great point. Thank you.
Any other questions? I can tell you that you've been here updating us quite a bit, you know, ever since you got here. And I can say with confidence that I get asked a lot of these same questions. I know the answers thanks to you. Especially about staffing, when people say, well, why aren't they doing something about this particular situation? I can kind of explain it from your level because you've explained it well to us. And I want our citizens to understand that you have a limited capacity here because of staffing and because of geography. And as you know, as council, we're working hard to try and change that, and we'll continue to do that because it's important to our citizens as well as it is to the staff so they don't burn out. So there's a lot that still needs to be done, but you know, the way you have been articulating this has been quite helpful to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our recommendation to the committee of the whole is that the committee of the whole receives the delegation from Staff Sergeant Mosiak, Chris, the RCC, regarding the quarterly update. And we'll go with that. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to council direction requests from the Director of Community Services regarding development variance permit 2601 631 20th Avenue South.
Your worship, council. So we received an application for development variance permit basically to allow one extra sign at the car wash on Erickson. As per the standard process, we went to council to see if there's interest in proceeding with it. There is. Then we'll do the public notifications to the surrounding property owners and then bring it back to council for a decision. Alternatively, council has the option to deny it at any point in the process. So if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to.
Well then. Like there's no questions, so I'll read the recommendation. The council directs staff to proceed with public notification for development variance permit 26-01. And further, that council directs staff to present all public comments received in a draft development variance permit, allowing one additional fascia sign on the primary building located at 631 20th Avenue South for council consideration at an upcoming council meeting. So, yeah, it looks good. It's a car wash in my neighborhood. An extra sign there will help me find it easier. Thank you. The next is council direction request from the Director of Community Services regarding the Cemetery Select Committee update.
Yeah, so we've had a couple meetings with the seminary committee over the past couple months, I suppose, having one in December and one here in January. Focused on the 2026 budget. And so what we had presented originally with to the committee was the budget that was kind of just business as usual, using like the anticipated RDCK service contribution that they were looking at expecting. And so with that also, we're including the cemetery mapping portal project. There was discussion around the green burials and, the planning that would go into that. And because there's upcoming changes to legislation, we're recommending that we wait to do any more looking at that until those regulations come out. From what I understand, we're anticipating that fall of this year. And so we'll review those and, rather than doing this bylaw revision twice or looking at it twice, perhaps we're looking at it once. So as part of the discussion, the recommendations that came out of the committee, the first one was to reinvest or take the interest that is being earned on our care fund, which is intended to ensure that the maintenance of the cemetery for years and years to come, particularly when it's full. It's a way to offset what taxation would be in the future. Right now, it's just slowly gaining the value, 20,000 or so a year, and it compounds over time. With the current rates of interments and expected 2.5% or so of additional, I think it's actually 4%, additional dividend revenues coming off with the care fund investments. We're thinking that in about 40 years, it would be to the point where we'd be at 70% of our maintenance operating costs, which is great. The committee recommended to take the interest, because that's the only part that we can touch, and start applying it to maintenance now, as an effort to reduce the taxation impact. Now, this year is interesting because we also have a much greater than usual surplus in that service, and it fluctuates a lot from year to year, depending on the projects, depending on the number of interments, first and foremost. We had a decent surplus as well, following COVID, more people being interred. So the recommendation from the committee, it could be A similar result could be accomplished in a different way by accessing that surplus to reduce, the tax requisition or the RDCK contribution as opposed to, the care fund interest. And there's a couple ways that could be done. So you could, essentially maintain the existing RDCK contribution, and we'd let the RDCK know that it would be the same as last year. It could be reduced further, to an equal amount as the interest from the care fund. Or it could be increased as originally proposed, which was approximately a 5% increase. And so, looking for direction on how council would like to proceed on this so that we can get the numbers they need for their budget.
Questions? Not hearing any, long-term, you have a question, Councilor Paul?
Well, I think the recommendation was going for the surplus and maintaining the status quo in the other areas.
Yeah, and as part of the recommendation, there's a need with our cemeteries for more policy guidance. And so, part of the recommendation is that we work towards clarity and, policies around the use of the care fund, use of surplus, and just general service levels. What is council expecting when it comes to service at the cemetery? So yes.
So just to follow up, then the legislation that later this year, do you think will actually change how this funding model will look, or?
As far as the funding model, no, I don't anticipate so, but there may be additions because from what I understand, they're looking at opening up other options for interment, such as composting. And another method that I don't recall how to pronounce properly is some sort of solution based thing. So they're looking at including that into the legislation as other options as well. So, there'll be a consideration of more than just green burials coming up or options for more than just green burials coming up. And that's where the discussion is. That's what we're getting at with the meeting is to see what else comes in and if there's any regulations that change that would impact how we would evaluate it.
Mm-hmm.
Principle being small changes or small to low changes at this point.
As far as the committee goes and our service out there. Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Thank you. I appreciate the idea of keeping the operation unchanged, but I didn't like the idea of taking it away from the care fund interest, because my perspective is that as we continue to put into the care fund, that it's for our generations, our children and our children's children, so that it's less of a tax burden. And so I do like the idea of utilizing the surplus for this year I realize that the regional directors are wrestling from some high percentages for their budget. And so if we can help out a little bit with that this year, but I definitely like the staff direction that you're going with not taking away from that care fund interest. So I appreciate that.
Yes, I'll read the recommendation. First is that council receives the February 10th, 2026 report from the Director of Community Services, titled 2025-2026 Cemetery Select Committee Update for information. Second, that council directs staff to notify the Regional District of Central Kootenay that the required contribution to cemetery operations will remain unchanged for 2026 at $96,010. And further, that council directs staff to develop draft policies for use of cemetery fees, reserves, surplus, and commissions for council consideration at an upcoming meeting. And that last point means that there may be ways to change the requisitions and the costs as we develop these policies. And I think that's kind of what's desired. So going ahead in the future, we have some more options on how we can deal with the needs of the cemetery. So I guess what I'm looking for is that council or Yeah, good with the recommendations. Everybody says yes, so we're good with those recommendations. We'll go then with council direction request regarding Centennial Baseball Field Revitalization Project.
I think the last time that we had this in front of council was at the Rotary in the delegation to discuss. And so we've been working with Rotary and the Minor Baseball Association as they've been continuing to work towards their end goal, which is the development of the Centennial Field or baseball field project, essentially a start, to take it down and start over, sort of rebuild of the entire thing, like a brand new facility essentially. And so we just heard too that they just got moved to the second round of their Blue Jays grant proposal, which is fantastic for them. I guess they've put in this a couple of years, and this is the first time they've gotten shortlisted at that level. And so they're expecting to present, I believe, at the end of this month to the Blue Jays crew, and after that they'll know if they're getting that funding. And I think it was, well, I could be wrong, I'm not gonna say, but it wasn't, the full project amount. It was a portion of it.
It was a lot though.
Yeah, it was
Like
definitely over
talk to someone.
100,000. But I can't remember if it was. Yeah, it was a significant chunk. And so what they're hoping to get out of council today is it just, they want to have a letter of support saying that council supports use of this field in this project. In the long term, basically landowner permission at its core. And with that, rises the question of maintenance and how it's maintained, and how you plan for the life cycle costs, the asset management piece. And while noting that baseball isn't something that is limited to just people who live in the town of Creston, and that we have a regional district has a recreation service that we're a part of, seems like a natural fit. As far as looking at maintenance costs and asset replacement costs, that it would be included as part of that service. Now, without the detailed drawings and budgeting that we need to really, I guess, reduce some of the uncertainties around how much maintenance would cost. We've done our best to put together estimates that really assume that we're not having much volunteer support. That's not a guarantee, right? We're not getting things donated over the course of the project, and as far as the asset replacement, we're looking at that there's a 30% contingency at this point because we just don't know everything that's going to be included that would need to be replaced in the long term. So, that gives us the rough number of it being between $60,000 to $100,000 per year to maintain and save up for asset replacement as over the lifespan of the project. I guess again, the unknown there is that there's a lot of unknown. Point here and something else. Yeah. In order to get to that point, like I mentioned, we need these drawings, we need this detailed budget. These can come at a significant cost to people that are planning this out. And so it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing because the approval would be great for them to cement in that yes, indeed, this will be allowed to go ahead, but it doesn't give the level of detail needed to know what the actual impact necessarily is. So I mean, basically the the letter of support that we're asking for is, you know, supporting for use of the land. And then as the next step, proposing that this gets referred to the RDCK Valley Services meeting, requesting inclusion in that service. And then it'll be a matter of refining the numbers, you know, over the months to come as more detail is provided. But without some sort of green light, these organizations are kind of shooting in the dark, not sure what the result is going to be of their efforts. So, yeah, looking for that support.
Councillor Isler.
Like that would be an amazing project if we can get done, because then we'd be able to actually use baseball tournaments and stuff. There's a ton of money in.
Yeah.
Would be great.
So with all you said, like, what's the best way we can support? Because if they could get that funding, which is that would.
Well, certainly the best way is to say, yes, you know, we want this here. It's, you know, I don't know that the support letter would be as well received if it says conditional upon support from, you know, the committee, but I think that's kind of the reality of where we're at. You know, and we'll go there, we'll present, and, you know, they have staff that understand what it costs to maintain these things as well. But that, again, that's not gonna get them exactly what they need by the end of the month. So it's really, you know, that I guess that support for it in principle. At this point.
Councillor Otten.
Are we asking for a different level of service for maintenance and ongoing maintenance of these fields than is happening at other fields? The RD or
I don't want to speak for the RDCK on what their maintenance standards are. Anecdotally, I think that the fields that are managed by the RDCK are seeing a lack of maintenance. I think that user groups have attested to that as well.
right, and so supplemental, does that impact, you know, I think we're asking for a higher level. Or that's been an expectation of us that we would maintain this if this funding dollars comes in the field can be developed. So I guess, is that part of our conversation back that we want to see equivalent maintenance?
Yeah, so the regional district actually, there is history for them to fund recreation on municipal property. You establish the level of service, you tell them what it is and the cost, and they pay it. Because that's the level of service that we need to maintain. I think the question that will become, which is all part of the design development report, this chicken and egg problem, is until you have a detailed design report, you don't know exactly what you're maintaining. You don't know how much money, like, you know, is the electronic scoreboard a $10,000 scoreboard, or is it a $100,000 scoreboard? Because those are two different numbers you're putting away for that asset replacement. So there's so much that needs to be figured out here. Hence the wide range in that 60 to 100,000. But I think when you get that design development report, if you want to maintain that, there is a level of service to maintain that, to, you know, the turf to a turf level, the equipment, red shale, and everything that goes to the field. So I think that until you get that design development report, it's an unknown. Once you get that, that's the level of service to maintain that particular asset. Yeah. And it would differ from what they're doing now.
Right.
So yes.
Councillor Baldwin.
Oh, well, that was part of my question anyway. I'll just a small one then. The storage shed that's there, would it be able to handle all this new equipment?
Storage shed, addition of a new storage shed is part of.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I do know when talking to Director Tierney, he's a very strong supporter of this, and he would be the most impacted because Erickson is right close to Creston, so he would love to see this go forward. So as we approach RDCK, I think we'll get more support for this, and of course, anything that gets us towards a Blue Jays grant would be incredible. So The letter of support is just a small part of it, and he'll be writing a letter of support as well and supporting it monetarily somewhat. So I think there's momentum there, and I hope it's enough to carry us right through to the granting of this, because it would change our community as far as baseball goes, and it is needed. The fields are not adequate for tournaments and barely adequate for games, so and there are a lot of people that play baseball. There will be more if we have better fields. So I'll read the recommendation is that council directs staff to prepare a report for the Creston Valley Services Committee requesting that the ongoing maintenance cost of the Centennial Baseball Field Revitalization Project be funded through shared recreation service. And further, that the mayor be authorized to write a letter of support for the Centennial Baseball Field Revitalization Project. We'll go with that? Yep, I see everybody. I certainly am. Thank you very much. We'll go on then to next is the Public Art Working Committee Annual Action Plan.
For your municipal services board, your planner on this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. So before you today is a draft Public Art Working Committee Annual Action Plan. Presenting council with an annual action plan is a requirement of our terms of reference for that committee. The purpose of the action plan is to, at the beginning of each year, inform council kind of about the committee's general goals and objectives. So this plan gives council a clear picture of the committee's goals and directions for the year. It's really designed at this point as their first one to be simple and flexible, and something that we can continue to build on annually. Overall, the plan just lays out their vision, project goals for 2026, future initiatives, and an inventory of public art that's been installed so far. It also will help to serve as a really helpful onboarding tool for our new members. Sometimes we see a bit of turnover with that committee, and it will support us when applying for grants. So for 2026, the committee is kind of focusing on 3 main projects. The first is kindness meters. So the plan is to install old parking meters that were previously purchased by the Lions Club from the town of Creston. And the Lions Club has graciously agreed to donate those back. And those meters will collect funds for public art and different types of art programs and objectives. The second one is supporting phase 2 of the Kootenai and their arts installation objectives. The committee has a really good working relationship with Lower Kootenai Band and are really keen to kind of help support that project. And then finally is our park. So they're in the very early stages of planning something that they've called Art Park, which is essentially a revitalization project of the downtown green space. The vision includes, murals and interactive play features. But of course, this idea is really in its early stages still. And like any other park improvement, it would go, through its standard approval process to council budgeting process, what have you. So second, we're proposing updates to our terms of reference. This will just really help with maintaining quorum. And yeah, it'll just help with maintaining quorum. And because municipalities aren't always eligible for public art grants, the committee is also asked to add in a seat for the Creston Valley Arts Council so we can work with them on partnering for grant applications.
Good. Questions? No questions? Well, with the recommendation then, the council directs staff to present the Public Art Working Committee's annual action plan for endorsement at an upcoming council meeting. And further, that council directs staff to amend the terms of reference to include representation from the Creston Valley Arts Council and increase the number of community at large members from 1 to 2. Good with that?
That's good. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Now we'll go with the monthly direction request from the Director of Protective Services regarding fireworks for Canada Day celebration.
Thank you, Worship Council. So just, bit of history here, that since 2014, the fire department has been providing the, fireworks shows for Canada Day. Including the setup, the security and the cleanup that happens, the next day, that has to happen the next day. We've definitely had some challenges over the last couple of years, with, provincial burning bans being put in place. And so the conditions are, don't allow for fireworks shows, when those burn bans are in place. We got caught one year where, we had fireworks need to be ordered, months ahead of time. And so we ordered it for a show, and, the fire bans went in place. We had to essentially cancel the show, but we took delivery of the fireworks. There's federal requirements on how these things need to be stored, and, we don't have the facilities to store them properly to meet those requirements. So in that case, we ran the risk and kept them in community here, and we used them at a different time. But that's not a habit that we want to develop or get into. The other, difficult part has been, just maintaining the, the training and the certification and licensing that's required to be able to deliver these shows. There's, training courses and, federal licensing to be able to handle and light, those fireworks and perform those shows. And so, we had, there was, when the, winter games were in Prince George, we were able to get a number of firefighters trained, and we were able to go up there and actually get, experience and get our licensing to be able, because they were doing shows every night. So we spent, 4 days up there, did the training, got shows every night, and then we earned our licensing certificate. All of those firefighters that take that training, besides myself, have moved on from the department, so they're no longer here. And, so again, it's becoming more difficult to maintain that. And, requiring the security, traditionally those shows were at the rec center and at the one end of the field. Right, the entire field needs to be cordoned off, and security needs to be maintained so that people aren't getting too close. And so, asking the firefighters to, participate in something like that, volunteer for something like that on a Canada Day is becoming more and more difficult. So with that, we're looking for, some direction, to, essentially the fire department is looking to no longer provide, those fireworks shows. And essentially we want to get ahead of, the Canada Day and put some public information out there. And so that's why this is coming to you ahead of time, so that we can get ahead of that and prepare some, good information to get to the public. I'm not sure what that looks like for Canada Day and those types of things, but in this day and age, it's getting more and more difficult to do fireworks shows. So, if there was a third party that, could deliver it, I mean, that could be possibilities, but I'm not going to allow a fireworks show. As the fire chief, I'm not going to allow a fireworks show if there's a burn ban, a provincial burn ban. It's just not the safe and right thing to use. And that's typically what's happening nowadays.
Councillor Hopkins.
I certainly support and no fireworks during fire bans. But what I think I'm hearing from you is just that we wouldn't have a fire department that is capable of providing fireworks services at any time of the year, fire ban or not.
Correct.
That makes me sad. That's just a personal comment. Fireworks. Yeah.
Councillor Baldwin.
But there are third parties holding fireworks displays.
Yes.
Is there some way that either we could support them or integrate them somehow? They must have some kind of specialist that they're allowed to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they would meet all the requirements to be able to do it. Absolutely. The fire department specifically did fireworks for Canada Day, I think there's other organizations that are planning other events. And so, I don't know if this is something that, another event takes on, and or could be supported. We do, there was a program, a grant program in place that the town could apply for Canada Day celebrations. And, that money was typically used towards fireworks. So the town could continue that. If that grant's available, we could continue to apply for that and perhaps push that money towards a group that's willing to plan and organize that event. If it's a matter of, hiring a third party, then, have the capacity, the fire department has the capacity to hire a third party if that was, the appetite, but
So
as far as physically doing it anymore, it's just not possible.
I totally get Canada Day, but there have been other fireworks events going on. Do they apply to you for permission to hold those?
Oh, yeah, through our bylaw, there is a process where individuals can apply for a permit to have fireworks shows. Yeah, personal consumer display fireworks shows, yeah.
Okay.
Also, there's
A couple things, wondering, what would be involved to get all the training for people, and if, we could do it on like a Blossom Festival fireworks, or, like where we're not gonna run into that weather situation. I think we're just gonna see less of those fireworks shows in general, and that's just what it's gonna be, but.
The training is, it's a 8-hour course to start, and then that's your entry level. And then to get your license as a supervisor, which you require a supervisor to be able to perform the show, you need to then be working under another supervisor for, I believe it's 3 or 4 shows.
Okay.
And then you submit that dates of those shows and what your capacity was there, and then they provide you with your fireworks operator license for those display type fireworks. And there might be some restrictions on there depending on what you did as far as your experience goes. And so that initial training is not bad. It's maintaining that supervisory level, and which can be difficult with just one show. And then as far as other times of the year, I mean, it's interesting because there is provincial legislation that is not really enforced that says, fireworks are only allowed for Halloween. And, our bylaw talks about, a permit process, and people can apply. And so then we can look at, the conditions at the moment for when they will do that and provide it there. So there's lots of pieces to look at. And I would suggest that, if you mentioned Blossom Festival, like if Blossom Festival wanted to organize a fireworks show, and as a fire chief, I could definitely, look at that and provide them with as the authority having jurisdiction. Yeah, we could look at that. And if you meet all this criteria of our bylaw, then absolutely give a permit to do that.
It's wonderful. Yeah, and I guess the other problem is that if we're, in the past, if we've been able to get funding for Canada Day fireworks grant, probably doesn't apply.
Yeah, and we actually went through that. So in that grant stream, we asked them if we could use that funding for, say, a Halloween fireworks show. And they said, no, it's Canada Day celebration. Because it's not specific to fireworks, it's Canada Day celebration. So you could use that money to, buy a big cake or,
Right.
Instead of on fire.
That I blow it up.
It wasn't just fireworks.
Yeah.
But they're pretty strict with it, like only that for Canada Day celebration.
Councilor Holland?
Do we know how much we normally would spend on fireworks?
So the last time that we did a fireworks show, it was about $10,000 is what we spent. And this was a number of years ago. The kind of the consistent, figures were about $1,000 a minute.
Right.
For a fireworks show. Now, again, that was almost pre-pandemic type levels. It's been a long time since I looked into it, but it's probably a lot more money now.
And were you were saying the firefighters were volunteering their time?
Yeah, the firefighters society got a $500 donation to do the security for fireworks, and then, yeah, and that was it, yeah.
So it'd probably be very expensive to have a third party who's doing the same scale to do that show.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because, people see this as a bit of a setback for Canada Day celebrations, and we have, had a drone show once for our 100th anniversary. I don't know what they cost, but I'm wondering if, we in future can consider that as an alternative, or if we need staff direction to explore that further.
Certainly council could provide the direction to staff to investigate it. I think the fundamental question is where does the funding come from? And so while with the fireworks, we were able to obtain $5,000 through the Canada Celebration Fund, which we contributed to that. Through the economic development, that was where the funding went. So I think that, and I think the opportunity is to consider, what other organizations could look after those kind of celebrations and receive funding for the regional district in kind. At one point in time, the chamber used to, look after that, the Visitor Info Center, some Canada Day, this Christmas parade, things like that. That's changed since then, but I mean, is there an opportunity to go back to those community groups? Because then, perhaps you can do some of these things much cheaper than if the town's involved in doing this. But if you wanted to direct staff and just provide coming back the cost, I mean, you certainly can investigate what the cost of the event would be. But I think it becomes more of a political question of how do we share that cost in the valley? Assuming it's a lot more money too.
That's right.
But it's a moot point if we don't have staff trained to do fireworks.
Or a drone show?
Oh, okay, for
That's
sure.
sort of what the question is.
Okay, sorry.
I think the challenge, and the chief outlined it pretty clearly, is that the challenge, and even for May, Blossom Fest, we have had, back the year that we canceled the fireworks because the fire ban was on Blossom Day weekend, so we didn't order it, then the fire ban comes off for July 1st, but you can't order it.
Yeah.
3 weeks to get, so we've had everything in the last 5 years. The other thing is if an organization hires a private contractor, which the fire department found out when we took this on quite a few years ago, is the contractor builds in a lot of cost, because if it gets canceled, they can't return the fireworks any more than we can. And so it built into their costs are all those risks. And if they look at our community and go, well, geez, they have a fire ban 9 out of 10 times, I assure you that's built into the cost. So when you get a quote from them for $10,000 and they show up and let off 3 fireworks and goes home, that's probably why. Is it's not going to be very effective any longer in terms of that risk.
Well, I'd be interested just to see what the cost of a drone show actually is. I think that would be good information just to have.
The last one was what, 17,000?
You can speak to that
Yeah.
a bit. Before I left on mat leave, I did request just in case. So for a Canada Day show at the low end, so about 100 drones, it's $20,000, and all the way up to the high end around 200, it's 40,000. So there's quite a big cost associated with
And how
that.
many drones do we have at the?
We had 120 drones.
That's pretty cool.
And I also understand that if you are going to book drones for Canada Day, you have to do it well in advance,
Yes.
because there is a demand, so.
Yeah, for the same reason.
Also,
I have heard of like laser water shows. Last mist up to, and then.
Yeah, like a fountain show.
Yeah, like it's true though. I mean, it's the thing that they do, where it's like misted water.
We could not water the lawn.
And laser thing.
Save on that.
The sprinklers on.
Like, because we're gonna have to move away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think there's gonna be more and more things developed where that we could look into.
So certainly staff will put together a price, a current price, and then bring back a report to council with what direction you'd like us to take it, if, any of you wish to see that funded.
Okay.
Because it is a lot of money.
It is. And
so
could I add one more thing? If we can't find any other alternatives, drone or water droplet shows. If we could do something that was community orientated, the last one where we had the big kind of festival laid out on the grounds, there was a lot of good things said about that. And I feel like if we had that as something that we wanted to do annually, we could have a lot of energy and put a bit of money towards that.
Completely rethink it.
Yeah, rethink it, have it as a free barbecue with entertainment.
Thank you. Yeah, a Taste of Creston is committee has been getting together, so we've had 2 meetings so far and looking to expand, bringing in the chamber and partnering with the College of the Rockies, and so we're working on an event. I'm hoping it to be Millennium Park. We haven't applied for that yet. And so yeah, food and entertainment, and we've booked elevation game, so it should be a fun.
That's a Canada Day event.
Canada Day is it? Yeah, Taste of Creston Canada Day.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because
that's
separate
great.
to fireworks, there's still a strong desire in our community to have a community.
Yeah,
on
and
Canada Day.
to get together.
Yeah, and I know this one's in the works, and I'm really happy to hear that, because
Mhm.
it would have was very short notice last year and was successful, and so
Yeah,
to build on that and then have it at a place like Millennium Park would be amazing, and I think we'd get a lot of people out of that, so.
So
Yeah.
we learned a lot last year, made a lot of mistakes. So
They ran out of food pretty fast, and we did, but that's good, it's not a bad thing.
yeah.
I'll read the recommendation, and that council receives it. Says January 29th, but I guess it's actually February 10th. Council request titled Fireworks for Canada Day celebrations from the Director of Protective Services for information. And that council directs fire department staff to no longer plan and provide fireworks displays for Canada Day celebrations. And further, council directs staff to prepare a communication for residents explaining the challenges associated with hosting a Canada Day fireworks show and the reasons it cannot proceed. And then we'd add to that just the cost of a potential drone show to see if there's interest in the regional district and the community at large in having a drone show and how to fund it. So if we throw that in there, then we're okay with that?
Mhm.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's your turn, Mike. Council direction request from the CAO regarding Creston Service Excellence Initiative.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much. So the purpose of this, and I hope everybody got to read all the wonderful information I provided, so I don't have to go over in great detail. But I think the first fundamental thing is this is not new. This is really, I mean, we have some level of service policies for different things that are very dated or not very measurable. And then probably the more important thing is when we did the asset management plan in 2019, one of your recommendations out of that is about adopting very specific levels of service policies. And due to capacity and other competing priorities, these were not high level priorities for us to work on as an organization. So, but here we are. What we want to do is we've learned a lot. We actually want to be able to share on more of a public facing, what are the levels of service? And we think this helps tie into when we do our citizen satisfaction survey, you know, what is it that we're doing? What is the measurement and how are these costs or what's the magnitude of order for these services when you're providing them? And they can be done quite simply, but when you have appropriate measurements to measure that service, that's very public facing. And certainly council through budgets discussions at the very front end, they talk about levels of service. There's that public facing, we talk about drinking water where residents expect to be able to turn on the tap, it's clean drinking water and they can shower and water their lawn at the same time. That's what they consider a level of service. And certainly on a technical side, there is a lot more detail in terms of reservoir size, capacity, and maintaining PRV valves and all sorts of things like that. And so this is very much separating that and creating those very public facing levels of service. So why level of service KPIs matter? Well, so they define, really in a clear way what our service is and make sure that we guide to a consistent delivery of service and setting expectations for staff and council. And for some of it, it's really, it's really as simple as having a measurement of stating how often the lawn at the parks are mowed. You know, we have direction to maintain the parks at a certain, you know, like just keep them maintained, but we don't really say, well, how often? And so there is a measurement that can be put in place and a level of service that council gets to then control. So if you wanted to adjust, you know, the frequency of maintenance, there's a number that you can look at and change. And that's where the role of KPIs comes in, providing that measurable benchmark to sort of track performance. Certainly through budget, there was a few discussions where, you know, we're having measurable KPIs to sort of show the work and the gaps when we were not able to do that. And whether those gaps, being able to identify whether those gaps are sort of a variance or anomaly to service. And, you know, we can talk about, say, snow clearing or the lack thereof this year. You know, but that's a variance. You know, we're not going to show that we did a lot of snow clearing because there was no snow to clear. But, you know, we can certainly speak to what the variance was. So now council understands, okay, my budget was this, we didn't meet the targets. Why? Well, we didn't have snow. So it allows that very clear storytelling as well when we're talking about budgets and assets. You know, the benefits in terms of governance and public trust is, you know, when you have a very transparent framework, you know, it allows for really informed decision-making. We were talking about the cemetery earlier, you know, and again, if your level of service is quite simply, you know, we're going to maintain and do all the grounds maintenance once a week. If you wanted to affect change in the cost of the level of service, you could say, well, what would it cost if we change it to once every 2 weeks? Right? You know, there's an impact to that, but there's also a cost difference to that. And if that was the path that the elected officials chose to do, well, now your level of service is grounds maintenance once every 2 weeks. And certainly that has a cost implication. So it's very transparent and very clear when you're talking about how you can impact those levels of service in more of a micro way. And certainly by implementing having levels of service and KPIs, you know, aligning with our sustainability goals and continuous improvement, and allows us to continue that planning into our assets because, you know, every service we provide is tied to some forms of assets. So give you some examples of levels of service. And again, these are really to keep them at a very public facing high level. They're not technical. We want them to be as simplistic as they are because they're the measurement of what the resident expects, like turning on the tap and getting clean drinking water. That is the measurement they want. You know, how many times we service valves in our system. So roads, priority 1 routes cleared to bear within 8 hours post snowfall. By the way, that's already an existing service policy you have. But, you know, the way that policy is written is not very public friendly, I would say, and it doesn't have a reporting requirement for us to report out on whether we're doing that. Water, less than 4 unplanned outages per year, per 1,000 connections annually. Again, something we track. This is when we have water main breaks. And of course, that tells council something about our investment into your assets. So, you know, the number of unplanned outages is certainly a testament to the age of your infrastructure. And partly to the planning of how we're trying to stay ahead and replace our oldest infrastructure first. Parks, playgrounds inspect every 14 days, hazards mitigated within 24 hours. Again, we're required by MIABC to do parks inspections. They're already being done, but we're not reporting that out to council. And so council doesn't really know whether we're meeting that requirement for MIABC or not, as an example. Permitting single family dwelling permits processed within 30 days, and that was the safer building permit. And certainly where a measurement like that is if suddenly your KPI is coming back and that level of service is showing that you're not meeting that, you know, the question is why? And so these would be the measurements to those levels of service that you could quite easily have. Percentage of priority routes cleared within target window, you know, greater than 90% of the time. So that's the target. This is data that we have to collect anyhow for MIABC. We have to keep logs of where we plow snow. So, you know, again, this is now just formalizing that same data to council. Water, unplanned outages per 1,000 connections. We want less than 4 per year. Anything greater than that certainly may tell us that we need to invest more money in keeping up on the older infrastructure, like trying to stay ahead of the unplanned outages. So maybe more money invested in that renewal. Wastewater effluent compliance, we have to do the testing and reporting, and there's actually logs of that already. So now it's just a matter of reporting that to council. Parks, the inspection cycle compliance, again, we're required by MIABC. So if you notice, none of this is actually new work. It's actually work that we're doing. But it provides council that ability to see it and then understand how they could affect that level of service if they could. And then permitting median days to decision, you know, less than 30 days. And things like that, when staff come back and say, look, our median days to decision on building permitting now is exceeding 45 days. And you say, well, why is that? Well, suddenly we're doing 10 times the number of permits than we were before. You see, you'll be able to understand what are the impacts to that. And when you have an impact to a service level like that, you're always presented with three choices. You can increase the resources required to meet that particular target, so invest more money in it. You could, in some cases, if it's not a service that you feel is all that important, maybe you could remove the service, or you could change expectations and say, okay, well, you know what, let's change the level of service not to be 30 days and make it 45 days or 60 days, like, so council has that ability. So as part of the framework is that, certainly I kind of have to be the leader and champion of this throughout the organization as well as our division directors. We've had, some discussions around this at the director level already about how we're going to champion this, and we've sort of built out a change management plan. There's a bunch of work that goes into it. We need to be able to develop that clear vision and communicate. And it's not just communicate, with our staff. It's also public. We've got some public messaging drafted up that would go out as well, of what the benefits of the community is and how this ties right in from the work we're doing right out to the annual report. So everything just kind of lines up and flows through. Policy alignment and training. So we do have some training and work to do with staff right down to our frontline staff, because they're some of the ones that keep the data. They do some of the work, and they can actually help us form some of those levels of service statements as we can better understand, how we're recording the stuff and what's important out there, which allows us to give council some options as we go through the adoption process of some of these policies. And then what we want to do is be able to start with some pilots. In other words, is because we have a lot of service areas that require either updating or new policies altogether. And it does take some time for the directors to sit down with the staff right from, top to bottom to be able to have those discussions about the KPIs, the work, what data are we collecting, how are we collecting it, how are we going to get it into a reporting schedule for council and onto, out to the public. There is some services that we already have those policy fours that we can do some quick refining to and get them out, because we want to start with, 3 or 4 or 5 policies just to get going on it and sort of build out from them versus trying to do it all at once. Sorry that this, so we did have a little bit of and this is just an approximate timeline from when I first started putting this together. It might have to adjust a little bit, but the whole goal is to try to get the vast majority of this done within the first, within this calendar year. So, basically confirm the services that we're going to, start implementing policies for. We've created those service areas. You draft some templates and select KPIs, and that's really more for the test ones that we're going to do. Start the pilot in April and June, where basically we're testing 3 to 5 level of service policies that we put in place. Build out the dashboard on Invisio so that we have a very consistent reporting tool with the data that we're already collecting. And then through the summer, we'll scale it up and basically expand it to all the other service areas. And again, there's it does take a little bit of time to roll out, but I think, if we're very thoughtful about making sure that the KPIs that we tie these things to are measurements that we're already collecting data for, because we collect an incredible amount of data. That's just peeling it back to the data that matters versus overloading people. And so each of the policies will have no more than 3 to 7 KPIs. In other words, regardless of how complex the service is, such as the fire department, you will only get reported back on 7, KPIs, because they're the 7 that matter to the public versus more detailed type thing that may be good for discussions on expanding services or something like that in a detailed report, but wouldn't be the public facing reporting. And then certainly want this embedded into our next budget process, or try to get as many as we can embedded in there, so that it gives council that opportunity. Again, when you're at that budget stage and we talk about, well, do you want to touch levels of service? How do you want to change these? There is some minor tweaking that can take place, but you can see a little bit more clearly what some of the options are in terms of levels of services that are being provided. I think that was it. So what I provided council was roughly intentionally is I just put together the framework for council. What will if we're acceptance of that type of framework, That's the guide that what we'll do is we'll have a policy that basically adopts that framework as the framework for your level of service policies. And I'll bring that back for the next council meeting, and at that time, then that will give staff that direction to start building those levels of service policy based on that framework itself. So there's questions.
That's good. Councillor Hutton.
Yeah, I think this looks great, Mike, and I love the idea of dashboards that are available throughout the year for people to see where we're meeting and excelling. I do have one question though. When I was reading through the framework document, they talked about looking at temporary level of service variances.
Yep.
And I'm just curious what timelines would look like around that. And when that is something that comes back to council for notification. So we've, there's been a benchmark or target set, and for various reasons it can't be met. How long does it just sit as a temporary variance being signed off before it comes back to us with, we've got some issues here?
That's a great question. I attached some sample draft levels of service policies, give you a
Yeah.
little bit of a flavor.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, those might be very close to the level of service ones that we'd like to pilot. But if you go look at those, I mean, I'll look at the first one that I put on there was the water one. And on the water policy, for an example, a variance and risk tolerance. So the level of service may temporarily, so the word temporarily is there, vary due to major water main break. Well, if we have a water main break, we may not be able to provide service beyond that break. That would be a variance. Source water contamination, staffing shortage or supply chains, and extreme weather events affecting infrastructure. So those are all things that would give rise to when, we'd have a temporary variance to the level of service itself. And then the protocol, the flex protocol identifies what kind of happens next. So if you go down on this particular one, CAO notified of any significant multi-day impacts. That notification is for me to determine, what the next step is, which would be including notifying council. Part of our water is you also have an emergency guide or emergency plan for water delivery.
Yeah.
So in there, it also has a bunch of other notifications as well. So these policies are not to be the be all end all procedural things. In fact, we are removing intentionally operational decisions in front of council, because these are the dynamic things that we have to change all the time.
Yeah.
And saying that in the event this takes place, Bill shall phone Jane. Well, if Jane doesn't work for the town anymore, we got to bring the policy back for you to change it, and it's an operational type thing. Is what the policy you need to have is quite clearly what is the service you're delivering to the residents, and what are the variables that we're willing to accept at the surface, as reasons why that service delivery may be, temporarily interrupted. And then what are the protocols at a high level? What are the protocols for council to understand that'll take place? So it would be up to me to, when I notify council, and certainly in the emergency water plan, there's some decisions that would have to be made if we were, say, to be without water. In additional to that, the one before that, emergency management coordinator is notified of events with water main breaks, infrastructure failures, extreme weather events, so on and so forth. If, for an example, we have a water main break that's going to say take out a hospital, school, or 100 residents, our EOC is activated, and one of the first things that EOC does is notify the policy group, the policy council. So in other words, rather than building that statement into the policy, as it doesn't have to, there's enough triggers there that council will be aware when it's appropriate to.
Right.
And if you look at the other policies, again, very similar languages to what, if there's a delay or change to that level of service, to what that escalation protocol will be. The fire one's a little bit different, roads one's a little different, but they're all relative to as they ramp up. And I think all of them at some point would have a notification to the CAO.
So just to clarify, when you speak about temporary level of service variances, you're really looking at a day or two. We're not looking at months long variances needing to be in place. It sounds like that.
No, so people, again, great comment. No, none of these are all very temporary. These are the things that would be the blips on the radar for a day or two or an hour. And depending on what the issue is, and again, this is where, so for an example, if parts of our water system was going to be down for a week because we had to order a special part, be rest assured, our EOC set up that triggered the councils, like all those things will take place. You know, I can't think of that happening, but you know, there could be extenuating circumstances that could be, you know, the term temporary will be temporary to get back to what it is. It could be longer contamination of a system, for an example, and having boil water notice advisories. I mean, that could last as long as a year, but in the grand scheme of a service, it's still temporary. And there's nothing you can do to remove it except for do the work to
Right.
get your system decontaminated.
Any other questions? I think this will be quite valuable in financial planning, especially,
Yeah.
you know, we have some that are very reactionary and that are hard to predict, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them, we should be able to attach some sort of numbers to them. And so I will read the motion is that council endorse the proposed corporate approach to establishing levels of service policies for all municipal services, and that council approve the 2026 implementation roadmap, including the pilot services, roads, winter operations, water and building permitting, and further that council report, that administration report back to council in Q2 2026 with the first corporate level of service dashboard and draft level of service policies for pilot services.
Your worship, I apologize if we could just change the recommendation to remove the areas, the roads, water and building permit, just including the pilot services, or including pilot levels of services up between 3 to 5 or something along that lines. Because I think when I first originally was putting this together, other issues had come up which forced us to kind of look at those levels of service, such as cemeteries. So it popped up, and so it might be one that we want to pilot.
Okay, so including 2 or 3 pilot services, would that be
3 to 5.
3 to 5 pilot services rather than that wording?
Yes, thank you.
I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Eisler, seconded by Councillor Dumas. Discussion, all in favor? That motion is carried. Sorry. Okay, fine.
My hand down.
That was
Fine, let's get out of committee of the whole then.
Yeah.
So then I need a resolution to revise from committee of the whole right after that. We can do that. And then we'll move on to, we'll continue then with division reports, corporate administration, request for decision from the CAO regarding corporate policy review and restructure.
Sure, and I threw this on here as the catch-all for a series of reports for this meeting and future meetings as we're going through the policy manual and getting rid of some very dated policies. You know, well, again, we've known that they were there, and it's just really hard to get to them, and this really, this project will allow us to really clean those up and just, we have to get rid of them. It's a renumbering thing. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we, as council, give you that friendly reminder of what policies are and how they differ between, you know, what council resolutions for, what your policy and writing is for, and what bylaws are for. And sort of, you know, again, as we move forward, our policies will look a little different because again, we're going to take some of them in the future. We're going to amend a number of the policies, taking out some of the operational level direction that's in some of them. There's not many. A lot of them do have very high level, you know, expectations by council. Those are fine, but you know, we do have some refinements. So what I wanted to do first before we start that work is just repeal anything that's just. And so that was as many as I could get in for this agenda. You'll have a number more coming. If there's any questions in each of those, I unfortunately we have to do them individually, so I'm going to do them very individually and on the block. And if there's any questions on the upcoming items, I certainly can answer any questions about those policies or any concerns before you do the motions to repeal those. But if there's any questions about this particular informational report, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll get the ball rolling with the motion that the report titled Corporate Policy Review and Restructure dated February 10th, 2026 from the CAO be received for information. Councillor Holland, second Councillor Baldwin. Discussion, all in favor? Motion is carried. With that in mind, let's go for a request for decision from the CAO to repeal policy number SER 001001 drainage master plan.
Unless council has a question, I think that these the following staff reports sort of speak for themselves and provided as much context of whys and outcomes. So this is just a policy that's no longer required.
So no lengthy explanation, without intending the motion. Yeah, the report title, repeal policies, SCR 001 drainage master plan. Dated today from the CAO is received for information and that council repeals that said policy. Council Baldwin, second, Councillor Baldwin, discussion, all in favor? Well, we've repealed one. We're not done.
Running rules.
Next is, request for decision to repeal policy SCR 001 sewer service extension policy.
This policy is just quite simply inconsistent with legislation.
Good. Motion is that the report just mentioned, dated February 10th from the CAO is received for information. Then that council repeals said policy. Councilor Leisler, second, Councilor Douglas, discussion, all in favor, motion carried. Next then is request for decision to repeal policy SCR 001 water service extension policy.
Same as the previous one, it's inconsistent with the community charter, the legislation.
Okay, so I guess,
Not to mention, we already provide water outside our boundaries, which
and I'll shorten that just by motion to repeal this policy. It's all written in the motion to repeal. Council Aries, second, Councilor Eisler, discussion. All in favor? Motion carried. We'll go on to the next one, which is SCR 001-110 hazardous materials containment policy.
this policy would be a good example of A, it's not consistent with current practice, and two, is very operational in nature and should not be a council policy. Since it's pretty hard by policy to direct a dynamic event.
As noted in the agenda then, the main part of the motion is that council repeal that policy. So motion two, Councilor Dumas, second, Councilor Holland, discussion, all in favor? That motion is carried. All right, next one is request for decision regarding executive assistant recruitment. So I guess we're not repealing anything.
No, we're not. Yeah, sorry, that's all I can get to. I've already got 3 more for the next agenda. This part's already on there, so. Thank you, Your Worship. So this, so I think this and I think this ties into my next one, well, it ties in, but it's like my, the next one as well. So this is just to request early approval to begin the recruitment process. You know, you'll be contemplating, you're just going out, your budget document's just going out this week. You're gonna get a little bit of public feedback. And you don't adopt your financial plan bylaw till scheduled till sometime in March. This just allows us, by having this direction, really allows us to start that recruiting process to get the job description, job postings, get it out. I suspect it's gonna be a fairly long process. In other words, is that usually when we go through a hiring process, it's not less than 8 weeks, and that's really being optimistic. And then certainly if anybody's moving here, it's longer. So I don't feel that we will be actually engaging somebody prior to the adoption of the financial bylaw adoption, but I would like that early approval so that direction is known, and that's what we're doing.
Any questions?
And will you be using an agency?
In this case, probably not unless, so what we typically do for HR hiring, for positions like this, where you're looking for skilled individuals with certain experience levels, is we quite commonly advertise through BC Civic Info, which then gives, you know, that's where a lot of people in the province looks at for, you know, whether they're in the municipal sector already or if they're looking to get into it. That's a very common one. Generally speaking, we will go there first if we don't get, you know, much of a reply. This is likely not a position though that fits typical using a recruiting firm. So, and I didn't budget for that. I think that if we don't get a good candidate the first time, we, you know, probably try again, I guess, because timing is everything.
Okay, all in favor?
So, Your Worship.
You need a motion.
You haven't gotten the motion.
I thought she was doing discussion.
I was a question.
I'll do it all with staff and
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Councilor Eisler, second by Councilor Rotten. All in favor now. See, quit throwing me off.
Yeah, not fair.
All right, it's a request for decision from the CAO regarding approval for an external consultant for ERP procurement.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Your Worship. And again, this is a multi-year project. It's funded over multi-years. But again, it has a long timeline to it with a number of phases. This is one of the more complicated phases, and it does take a little bit of time. As well as in our budget with our management intern, part of their work is to be able to help support the next phase 3 and 4, and they'll be here full-time in the summer months. So having this completed by summer to know what organizational readiness projects we need to work on in the summer maximizes that value. So is in their proposal, I believe that this was a 10 weeks. I put it in the report, 10 weeks, about a 10-week process. So by the time I engage them, get the agreement in place, and then we engage them, that 10 weeks will take us pretty close to summer pretty quick. Like it's, so again, it would be, trying to get them engaged within the next 30 days to get this started. This process here as well is a chunk just because I want to because our directors asked the question of, what the cost for the consulting to do, essentially an RFP. The RFP will be, quite in-depth because they actually have to go through function by function of the ERP system of everything that you expect it to do so they can compare apples to apples. So for an example, the financial side of it, you don't ask just the question, does it do bank reconciliation? You have to break it down. Does it do bank reconciliation? Do you do uploads from banks? Does it, step by step by step? Because if our director of finance is having an expectation, for an example, that he wants to do his bank reconciliations online, just asking the question, if it just does bank reconciliations, they go, yep, but it could be all manual. And so they have to create this list. So they said those lists will take 10, 12 pages of the detailed list of every step of what the software actually does. And so, so what they do is they break that all down of the common things that they know that software should do. And so they have that list. And then of course they meet with our staff in each of the departments and say, okay, what do you need it to do? What do you have expectations of upgrading looks like, so that they have that very detailed list. So the reason the cost for that, getting the RFP out is actually quite extensive and late. So.
Questions? Made the motion that the report titled Municipal ERP Procurement dated February 10th from the CAO be received for information, and further that council approves staff to engage an external consultant to begin the procurement phase. The municipal ERP upgrade project estimated at $49,300 prior to the adoption of the 2026 to 2030 financial plan. Councilor Dumas, second. Councilor Aries. Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. There's a net council action list before you. Is there any items that you would like to discuss, or? Councilor Baldwin?
Being that all the lands have been transferred to the housing corporation, is that an action item that you can take off there? Is it full page, or is it more to do with that?
Right, we'll have it attached to my agenda.
Just think it'd be
It was just all the parcels that.
Yeah.
That can definitely be moved to completed. It's probably just a glitch that it was there, but certainly, yeah.
It's such a
Check, it's also big page, you're right.
A full page, yeah. Okay. Noted, thank you.
Anything else? I need a motion that council receives the council action list. Councilor Holland, second. Councilor Hawkins, discussion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Moving right along, we go to community services. Information report from the Director of Community Services regarding agricultural land reserve exclusion application 500 Davis Drive.
It's been a long while.
Yeah.
Since last went over this at all. But operating on the direction here to proceed with that application. And so we've posted the signage required. We have the application drafted. We have the agrologist report supporting the application. And a public hearing scheduled, which point council can decide whether to proceed for the final application or not. Certainly the process has changed greatly from last time I went through an ALC exclusion application. The last couple of years, with the requirement of the local governments to make every application as opposed to individuals. So this report really is an update. And just a heads up, this is coming at the next meeting.
These things move slowly. Any estimate as to time?
I would say anywhere from a week to 2 years.
Week sounds good, but I doubt it. So, anybody have any questions on the soil testing?
That was a setup. Not Councillor Dubus.
Right, then I would request a motion that the report titled Agricultural Land Reserve Exclusion Application, 500 Davis Drive, dated today, the Director of Community Services be received for information. Motion 2, Councillor Baldwin, seconded Councillor Holden. Discussion. All in favor? Motion is carried. And next is request for a decision regarding fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2045/2026 for adoption.
This is the housekeeping and inflationary changes bylaw presented to council first, second, and third reading at the last council meeting. That's how we're seeking adoption of that bylaw with councils. Good with that.
Okay, motion to adopt. Councillor Eisler, second, Councillor Aries. Discussion. There's no discussion on the motion to adopt. All in favor? Motion is carried. Protective Services, information report from the Director of Protective Services regarding Fire Smart program transition to close intake.
The emergency management program.
Oh,
Thank you, Your Worship. You may have heard there have been some changes to the Fire Smart program as of recently. It was announced on January 28th that there would be some significant changes to the program. And this is mainly due to the high interest of the program. So they didn't anticipate how many people would be driving. And so the program changes include funding for the fuel management side of things no longer being available. Funding for the impacts of wildfire no longer being available. All funding requests would now be limited to 1 year. So thankfully we got in December for the 2-year program. And new applications will be competitive and based on merit and priority. Now they haven't been specific on what exactly that means. They've spoken a little bit about the wildfire risk class. In Creston, we're at a wildfire risk class of 2, which is the second highest. As well as recommendations in the CWRP. It will be based on geography. So details on that to come. And then minor changes to eligible fire smart activities will be made, but again, not super specific on that yet. So what this means for the town is that our program as of right now won't be impacted for the next 2 years. So we can still carry on as normal. However, any fuel management activities that we had intended, from our fuel management prescription will not be eligible for funding through the CRI program, which was $100,000. The future of the program remains uncertain. Funding decisions are still being made. And that's it. Any questions on that?
Will we have to apply for other streams of funding then?
In terms of the fuel management part of it?
Yeah.
Yes. Again, any of those projects in the prescription will require, unless council wants to allocate funding there, will require other grant funding. So, we can look at CBT and FES. I can't remember exactly what FES was. But there are a couple other funding programs we can look at. Whether or not we'll be eligible, I'm not sure yet.
There was a couple that were listed there, the Crown Land Wildfire Risk Reduction Program and the Forest Enhancement Society of BC. Yeah. Does it look like we may have a good chance of accessing some of those grants?
To be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time looking into those grant programs yet. So can bring more information to council on that.
Municipally, probably not.
And for community, for CBT, I think, you know, we might qualify for some of that funding.
Okay, the motion is that the report titled Fire Smart Grant Funding Update dated today, and the Director of Protective Services be received for information. Input two, Councilor Dumas, second, Councilor Harris, all in favor? Motion is carried. Move on to recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. And that recommendations 1 to 4 from the January 27th, 26th regular council meeting be adopted as follows. First is regarding the delegation from Mark Wolf, that they received, and further that council approves sponsorship of the Bleeding Tree Society's residency program in the amount of $1,500. These funds being allocated from councilors' advertising budget. Number two, that the request from the Kootenai River Skate Canada BC Yukon Territory section for discretionary grant to assist with expenses be received, and further the council approves a discretionary grant of $1,000 for the Kootenai Region Championships. Number three, that the discretionary grant application from school district number 8 with respect to the 13th annual youth powwow be declined, as school district number 8 does not qualify for discretionary grant, as it is a non-profit organization. Number four, that the 2026 budget review dated January 27th be received. And number five, that council direction request from the CAO regarding the addition of an operations sergeant position at the RCMP detachment here be received. That we approve the creation of the operations sergeant position. That council approves the inclusion of the operations sergeant position in the 2026 to 2030 financial plan. And further, that council directs staff to request the addition of the operations sergeant to the municipal police unit agreement upon adoption of the 2026 to 2030 financial plan. A lot of stuff there. I need over. Councilor Baldwin, seconded Councilor Holland. Discussion. All in favor? Those are all carried. We have some correspondence, a letter of support request from Luann Armstrong respecting history symposium, living history, and that council authorizes the mayor to write a letter of support for a history symposium. Motion two, Councilor Holland, second, Councilor Houghton. Discussion. All in favor? Motion carried. That looks interesting.
It does. It's really cool.
So the acting mayor's schedule is there in front of you. Next month, and it's Councilor Baldwin, and I may be away for one council meeting. After that, it's Councilor. Goes down to Councilor Dumas, Councilor Eisler, Councilor Houghton, Councilor Holland, and Councilor Arias for August. Question period. Any questions from the gallery?
May I have a question? May I have a comment?
Yes.
I was thinking about the Canada Day discussion. I'm wondering if asking the community if they want a drone show in part of that like conversation of we're not gonna have fireworks anymore. Do you want a drone show, or do you want to see it put our efforts to other community organization stuff as opposed to having staff spend the time looking for a drone show stuff? That's just my question.
One of our motivations, I think, are to at least get it costed out and how long it takes to book it. So when somebody says that we want a drone show, we can say, well, this is, take it back to your groups, this is how much it's going to cost. And we would certainly support you, the groups giving us some financial support or help with the drone show. But it's nice to have the answers to those before we take that up to the community.
Fair.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for clarifying.
The last drone show was great. I'd love to see another one.
Yeah, that was cool.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we will take a brief recess and then at the regular council meeting today be recessed, and by the authority of the community charter, move to a closed council meeting, with this meeting being closed from the public and news media pursuant to 90 sub 1 sub I. The receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege will be communications necessary for that purpose. We will not be reconvening in open, so I will just have that motion then. Motion to Councilor Arias, second Councilor Dumas. All in favor? Motion carried. So we'll take a 5-minute recess and reconvene in closing.
Actually, I wanna get the drone show of the guys that were on AGT.
ET.
Yeah, look it up, the news, it's got